The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to rock and roll star and righteous brother Bill Medley. He's just published his memoir, The Time of My Life, and released a collection of familiar blues standards, Your Heart to Mine. Stick around. Both of us have been to Graceland, but only one of us went to the movies in a limo with Elvis and Priscilla. So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview, brought to you by Amazon.com, Audible.com, and 1-800-DIAL-DJs. Please stop by the website, MrMedia.com, click on our advertisers, support the show. And remember, there's more than 1,000 interviews available at MrMedia.com. We've been doing this since February 2007. Hope you'll find something you like. And thanks for listening. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of guys who got lucky in a back seat more than once to the sound of Bill Medley's voice. Not that there's anything wrong with that. In the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Reading Bill Medley's autobiography, The Time of My Life, I was struck by something that he may find odd. His career could have come crashing down probably a dozen times since it began 50 years ago, starting with his first breakup with the late Bobby Hatfield, his singing partner in the Righteous Brothers, continuing through the murder of his first wife, his career as a restaurateur, and so many songs he turned down that became monster hits for other people. But he always managed to pick up the pieces, reorganize, find a new partner or path. Whatever it took, Bill Medley was not going to be stopped, all the way to the 2003 induction of the Righteous Brothers in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by Billy Joel. And oh, the colorful characters this guy met, and a few he romanced along the way. The Beatles, Rolling Stones, Elvis Presley, Phil Spector, Frank Sinatra, Darlene Love, Connie Stevens, just to name a few. Now, The Time of My Life is a rare rock and roll autobiography that reads like a genuine memoir. It won't change your life the way Keith Richards did in his, but the authenticity of Bill Medley's storytelling and the input and contributions of his lifelong friends will move you. As for his new CD, Your Heart to Mine, it's a slow, bluesy take on songs you know, but likely have never heard Bill Medley sing. My favorites? Rock Me Baby and Hold On, I'm Coming. Bill Medley, welcome to Mr. Media.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's first time doing Skype.
I'm delighted to be your first. It's amazing that at this point in your career, I could find anything that could be a first, so that's great. Hey, congratulations on this book. Did you ever imagine yourself telling your story in this way?
Well, no, I'm kind of a private guy, and but when Bobby passed away in '03, a lot of people said, you should at least write everything down, and before why you can still remember it. and so I did, but I got about halfway through, and I didn't like the process. I got so sick and tired of hearing about Bill Medley, And so I, but about a year ago, a gentleman that Mike Marino, who wrote the book with me, gave me a call and said, I hear you got a million stories, and I'd love to write the book. So I said, well, listen, come over, and we'll write uh, one chapter, and I think it was about my first wife, and he came over, and what he did is he recorded our conversation because I wanted him to react. I didn't want to talk, sit there and talk to somebody that was writing the whole time. I wanted to talk to somebody that was reacting to the story. So, and then he went home and wrote the chapter, and I just loved it. I loved how he did it. So I said, okay. So then we spent, 2 or 3 months with me telling all these stories that I've been telling over dinner, or war stories on the road with the band. But I enjoyed it, and I must say it was. By the time I was finished, I was very surprised how it came out, and I was surprised that because Mike Marino is a psychologist, so he had ways of. I'd tell him the story, and he'd say, "Well, so how did that make you feel?" So I felt like did about 4 months with a shrink, but it brought out a lot of stuff that I wasn't really. I didn't think I was going to talk about, but ended up talking about.
Well, you certainly started with I would guess, the hardest thing first. If the first time you get together with the guy, you start talking about Karen and her murder. I mean, that was, one of two things that I found really. I mean, kind of the things that made me feel like you were actually telling us an actual story, because that was pretty raw stuff.
Yeah, and I thought, I just felt that if he could write that, and get that down correctly, and it sounded like it was coming from me, uh, then I thought he could write probably all the other stories.
And
But it was a tough way to start.
well, yeah, and of course, the other big thing that you tackle is you're very straightforward about your feelings about Bobby Hatfield, and I think, there's one of two ways to go with that when you write a book like that. One is to kind of gloss over the differences and the issues, and the other is to, be straightforward about it. And that's what made me think of actually Keith Richards' book, because he was very straightforward about Mick Jagger in his book, and you were, I mean, you were pretty blunt about Bobby.
Yeah, well, if I was going to do the book, I wanted to do it as honest as I could, right, wrong, or indifferent. I certainly didn't want to turn our audience off, or people that love the Righteous Brothers. But I mean, Bobby and I, loved each other a lot. We just were absolutely two different guys, and we had two different comfort levels, and we didn't know that at the beginning. Bobby, at the first 3 years of our career, was, we just accidentally had a hit with Little Latin Loopy Lou, and we were like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and we didn't think it was going to last. We thought so. We took the music real serious, but we didn't take the career serious, because we just didn't think it was going to be there until we got on Shindig, and then recorded Love and Feeling, and then that's when it became big business, and that kind of that wasn't Bobby's comfort level. He was more happy, doing those first 3 years where it was just kind of going out and having a great time.
One of the things I found really interesting in the book was just the explanation of where the Righteous Brothers name came from. I always kind of wondered because on the surface it sounds like it's a little hey, we're taking ourselves very seriously here, but you explain that it actually, if people, we talk about the blue-eyed soul and the, black audience, it really had a genuine place that it came from.
Yeah, the blue eyed soul thing is something that we were very proud of because the black audiences gave us that name, and the disc jockeys, it wasn't a tag that we gave ourselves, because uh, we didn't first off didn't think we were that great, but having the disc jockeys saying these are my blue-eyed soul brothers, and the black community opening up their arms to us was just amazing because they didn't have to do that.
Mm.
There's there's a million great black singers that they could have been supporting. So to turn around and support a couple of white guys from Orange County was pretty amazing to us.
It's pretty remarkable. I mean, and it continued. You drew from both audiences your whole career.
Yeah, it's been real wonderful.
Well, excuse me. Sticking to the topic of the book for a minute, were you surprised going through, I guess, this psychotherapy with Mike Marino, the things that you would remember that maybe you hadn't thought about, or that maybe you didn't even want to think about over the years?
Yeah, like I said, he was real good at pulling out stuff, and it was real interesting. I would start to tell him a story, and it would remind me of another story, and I would say, write down Waylon Jennings. I'll get back to it in a minute. Write down this and that. So it's really interesting. I mean, because I had never had done anything like this, and it sparked so many memories, and I must say that it was a, when the book was finished, I had a lot of uh, kind of issues that I hadn't resolved about the Righteous Brothers, not necessarily Bobby, just about Bill and Bob, and that I finally understood by the time I got done writing the book. And, you know, you, listen, partnerships are the toughest thing in the world. It's tough enough to be married.
Hmm.
At least you can go home after a fight and make love. Bobby and I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And, but, we just went through I mean, just the same year Bobby passed away, we went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we had so many great things that we shared together that we didn't share with anybody else. And only Bobby and I had that sort of bond. So you can't help but have a strong tie to somebody like that. And I really love Bobby. And Bobby was uh, he was a very funny guy. I mean, comic, and but he didn't really let a lot of people in and let you close to him, which now I almost resent him for because you know I I want to look back as the Righteous Brothers as this great, warm, wonderful feeling, and I do. I mean, I miss Bobby like crazy, but he just kind of wouldn't let that part of our relationship happen. We never argued.
Hmm.
We never argued because we didn't confront each other, and kept us together longer, but didn't help us grow at all.
A couple months, I think it's been a couple months now since we lost Phil Everly. When that happened, I kept thinking to myself, I think I interviewed him. I went back and found that I had interviewed Phil, I think it was like 1984, 30 years ago. And I was thinking about him as I was getting ready to talk to you today, and that um, well, he and Don were actual brothers. You and Bobby were friends who sang together. It seems like a lot of the things that happened over the course of your careers as contemporaries basically were very similar. There were things you agreed on, disagreed with, you broke up, you got back together, you had success early in your career, late in your career. I just wondered if you had ever had much contact with them or knew either of those guys.
Yeah, Don and Phil were friends. I had the honor of opening for them in Atlantic City for a couple of weeks and got to know them real well. I did an album a few years ago, and uh, Phil Everly, Brian Wilson, and myself did "In My Room" together.
Oh, wow.
So, so that was a real treat for me. But uh, Brian and I have been friends ever since. We all started out together in the early '60s, and but it was just really a great feeling. I love to listen to that record because I love hearing Brian's voice, and then you hear Phil Everly's voice, and it just really warms my heart. I love, and I so uh, such a drag about Phil
Yeah.
because I mean the Beatles. Everybody will tell you, probably Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Anybody that's doing harmony listened to the Everly Brothers. They were the best.
I want to go find this song that's got you and Brian Wilson and Phil Everly on it. That's the
Yeah,
first I'm hearing of that. I'm gonna go look that one up.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah. Go ahead.
okay, I was gonna say now there's another uh, thing I want to ask you going back to. It's also very current in that February 9th, 2014, depending on when people see this, marked the 50th anniversary of the Beatles' first concert in the U.S. And a couple weeks before that, I had Tommy Roe on the show, and you and Bobby as the Righteous Brothers, and Tommy and Jay Black and the Americans, I believe, were all on the opened for the Beatles at the Washington Arena. Gosh, I'm probably getting the name of it wrong, but um, I was wondering what you. I talked to Tommy about it. I wondered what you remembered of that day, and if it stood out. I mean, I know that you went on to open for them for like 40 or 50 dates, but did that day stand out in your mind at all?
Well, it did, and it still does, because it was the beginning of yeah, obviously a whole to do, and you know, it was it was so interesting to see how these kids, mainly the girls, were reacting to these foreign guys. It had somewhat never happened in our country. And so it was remarkable to watch. I mean, after we got off stage and we stuck our head out there, it was unbelievable.
Um, Now you toured with them for quite a while that year. Did you, as crazy as things were around them, were you able to have much interaction with them while you were traveling, or did things kind of get separate because of the craziness?
Well, it was tough because of the craziness, but we went on right before the Beatles, and so we always talked to them uh, for a few minutes right before they would go on. They're waiting to go on, but we all traveled on the same plane, so we got to talk to the guys quite a bit, and did some doo wop music and all that nonsense, and so it was great. It was a lot of fun to do it, but it was more interesting than it was fun because those kids were there to see the Beatles, and the Righteous Brothers did. We had about three or four West Coast hits. So when we were at the Hollywood Bowl and stuff like that, we did real well. But boy, when we got to the East Coast, it was "We Want the Beatles." Oh man, boot camp of rock and roll.
I know Tommy Rowe had said that the year before that concert, they had opened for him in England, and about halfway through that tour, their first album came out, and he he could no longer go on after them because they were just still screaming for the Beatles to come back, and then even opening for them was tough because there was, we want the Beatles, we want the
Yeah,
Beatles. It's brutal, but at least you got paid, right?
at least we went not much. I think it was 750 a week, and our rooms and board or something. It was pretty ridiculous, but it was great to do. I mean, it was great to be involved. With such a phenomenon. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, now you didn't write that much about that in the book, which surprised me considering the timing of the 50th anniversary. And I guess I kind of wondered, if any of the guys had made a particular impression on you for any reason, if any of the four were more open to being social or.
Well, there wasn't a lot that happened, because you can imagine because of all the hysteria and that stuff. And so somebody else asked me, why didn't you write more about the Beatles? There was very little that happened. I mean, we talked to them for a couple of minutes before they went on, and talked to them a few times on the plane. But there was just so much stuff going on. I mean, they would sneak them into the hall, sneak them out the hall, and so there really wasn't a lot to write about. We went on the Rolling Stones' first American tour, and that was very cool because it was in California, and we had California hits, and they hadn't become huge yet.
Hmm.
So that was, and they were, very down home guys. They were pretty street guys, and the Beatles were wonderful too. But they didn't seem to be as street as the Stones were, and Bobby and I were uh, considered ourselves pretty street guys,
Hmm.
rock and rollers. So the Rolling Stone tour was a lot of fun, and I went to see them about 4 years ago, and they hadn't changed a bit. I mean, they were just wonderful. They went backstage and we talked for about an hour and a half,
Wow.
and their show was phenomenal. And Mick Jagger, I don't know how he does it. He never stopped moving. He just ran all over that stage, and I was getting winded for him.
All right. Well, let's talk about your music some more. Tell me about this new CD. Did it start out with a theme, with this blues theme, or was it just you wanted to get some product out to go with the book? Tell me about the CD.
Well, the CD, Your Heart to Mine, is a CD that I've always wanted to do. I started out as a blues singer, still consider myself a blues singer. I was very fortunate to do Love and Feeling and Soul and Inspiration and all those great songs. But I'm really basically a blues singer, and I wanted to get that done before I'm out of here. And I also wanted to pay tribute to all the great black artists in the 50s that influenced me so much, and just turned my heart and head on to blues and rhythm and blues, and so that's why I did the album. I started it just to kind of get it out of my system. I needed to do my favorite song by Ray Charles. Needed to do my favorite song by Sam Cooke and B.B. King and Bobby Bland, and so it was so much fun to do. But I did find myself actually, once I was in the studio putting my vocals on, I said, "Oh man, I'm doing I'm doing a Ray Charles song, and now they're gonna listen and say, well, he don't sound as good as Ray." So it was a little. So I kind of tried not to go directly down their lane.
Well, I noticed that. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, the two songs that I particularly like were "Rock Me, Baby" and "Hold On, I'm Coming." And it just hit me as you were talking that I think the best the version that I know best of "Hold On, I'm Coming" was actually, this is embarrassing, but it was actually, I think, on the Blues Brothers soundtrack 30
Oh,
years
good.
ago. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they covered that, and I thought, It's a kind of song I think it lends itself to interpretation.
Well, yeah, Sam and Dave and the Blues Brothers, but Sam and Dave did it as a fast song.
Hmm.
Hold on, dun-dun, I'm coming. Well, I did it. I did it as a blues.
Hmm.
I'm on my way. Dun, dun, dun. So I just always thought it would make a, a great kind of sexy blues song. Hold on, I'm coming. But so I did a few things like that, veered away from exactly the way Ray Charles did "Drowned in My Own Tears." You just because those songs are so great and those artists are so great, you're not going to do it better than them.
Right,
So
right.
you better do it different.
Well, I mean, on that in that regard, have you heard covers of your songs by other artists that you particularly liked?
Well, I've heard "Love and Feeling" done by Elvis Presley, Kenny Rogers. I mean, obviously Hall and Oates, and yeah, it's odd hearing somebody do what you did in the studio, like a little lick or a phrasing, and to hear Elvis Presley do my phrasing was it's great. It's really great. I remember at one point somebody asked Ray Charles about Georgia on My Mind. He said, "Well, there's the kid, one of those kids in the Righteous Brothers, does a great version of of, of Georgia, and all I did is rip Ray Charles off. I did whatever he did, I did. So I thought he would hate it,
Mm,
but now I understand. If I heard Joe Cocker sing one of my songs, and if he did it exactly the way I did it, I would be honored.
got it. Now, I mentioned that there were some songs that you have passed on over the years, and in fact, for the song that you and Jennifer Warnes did for Dirty Dancing, you passed repeatedly, trying not to do it. Are there any songs that you really regret that you passed on, or is it just? I mean, I'm thinking that if someone hands me a lyric sheet, for example, okay, here's a great song. You you look at it and you go, well, maybe for somebody else. I mean, how do you decide what works for you?
Well, it's just a gut thing. You listen to a song and you say, "Wow, I love that," and I would love to sing that. And a lot of them that I passed on, I would have loved to have sang. We passed on. We got to get out of this place that the animals did. Well, that was written for Bobby and I.
Hmm.
And if you listen to it, you can hear in the dirty old part of the city. And then he goes up high. That was Bobby.
Hmm.
And in the ghetto, the Elvis Presley song, I would have loved to have done that song, but I had just finished doing a song called Peace Brother Peace and Brown Eyed Woman, and I felt like I was starting to getting away from love, love songs, and that was kind of what we were known for after we did Love and Feeling and Unchained Melody and all that stuff. So I I just didn't want to do, kind of another protest song, even though I thought in the ghetto, I still think is the best thing Davis ever wrote, and I'm thrilled to death that Elvis got his hands on it because I think that was one of Elvis's best records, other than the early Sun recordings. I thought that was the best Elvis.
All right, I was actually going to resist asking you an Elvis question, but his name has come up so many times. I'm going to ask you an Elvis question. Um, what was it like to be a friend of Elvis's? Not just a guy who knew him or had met him in passing, but you were actually a friend of his. You spent time with him in Vegas. I mentioned in joke in jest Graceland, but I mean you were a friend.
Yeah, I was, but it's when you become friends with somebody, you kind of and a lot of the people that he grew up loving were a lot of the people I did. We both loved motorcycles. I used to race in the dirt, uh, and we just had a lot in common. And once you spend a lot of one time, which I did with Elvis, he would call my dressing room, say, come down, everybody's out of here. And I'm going on in about 10 minutes. So I'd go down and it was just him and his hairdresser and myself. So you just kind of forget that it's Elvis Presley, and it was just Elvis, all except one night. He said, "Bill, come on up, and watch me go on stage." I said, "Yeah, okay, cool." And I went up, and we were both standing in the wings, and they started playing that 2000 theme, and then they kicked into that great, I think it's Pork Salad Annie or whatever it was, and the women started screaming, and so they started fixing Elvis, getting him all ready for this. And so I kind of backed out of the way so they could, get Elvis ready, and I he was like in the shadows, and I looked and I said, "Oh my God, that's Elvis Presley." And it was really odd. I mean, I got to know him so well as Elvis. I mean, I knew who he was, but all of a sudden hearing the music and the girls screaming, I got so turned on, I almost went on stage myself. so so it was, very, very natural to be friends with Elvis. And he was a pretty quiet guy. He wasn't, he wasn't odd at all. And I mean this in a good way. He was kind of a mama's boy, and country gentleman. And so I just got to know Elvis, and he got to know Bill, and we just became one of the last things Elvis ever told me was he was just wrecked after one of his shows, and this is like at the end of his career, gained a lot of weight, and one of the last things he told me, he says, "Bill, I'm going to be all right." That's the last thing he ever said to me.
Mm.
I hated that.
Wow. Well, one last question. We'll end on a different note.
Good.
If you could leave a time capsule, this is a crazy question, but if you could leave a time capsule and put three Bill Medley songs in it, what songs would you want a future generation to discover of yours?
Oh boy, probably a song that I recorded in the probably 69 or 70, that written by Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, called Brown Eyed Woman. It's a really good song, and it's a good record. I would want Love and Feelin' in there. I think I didn't write it, I didn't produce it. It's just, I think, a great record. And boy, I don't know, maybe Unchained Melody, and I didn't sing that. Bobby Hatfield sang it, but he did such a great job singing that, and I produced it.
Mm.
So I was very proud. And I mean, Bobby came in and sang it twice. And then he left the studio and came back and said, "Bill, I have an idea. Punch me in right here." And he did that real high note, which wasn't supposed to be in the record. And now it's probably the most, famous part of that song.
Very
So
nice.
I'd put that in the capsule.
All right. Well, folks, listen, you can find Bill Medley's memoir, The Time of My Life, as well as his new CD, Your Heart to Mine, anywhere that great books and music are sold, or you can order them right now at a great price at MrMedia.com. If you're watching the show on MrMedia.com, right below the video, somewhere over there, you'll see both the book cover and the CD cover. You can click on them right now. You can download them, get them as a digital download, or you can have them sent to you. I'm sure Amazon will send them via drone, perhaps. So get them at a great price. Do you know, Bill, do you have a website for yourself?
Yeah, just BillMedley.com.
All right. And have you gotten into the social media age, Facebook or any of that kind of stuff?
I'm the worst. I still have one of those flip-flop phones. I, I'm an antique,
All right.
But I'm going to. My daughter's going to teach it to me, so
Well,
I'm going to get into it.
we won't hold that against you. It's been just an absolute pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us today on Mr. Media.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you. Great to see you. Next time, maybe we can have a beer and look at each other face to face.
I would like that. I don't get to do that very often.
The preceding presentation was brought to you by the Realm Network.